Okay, so welcome back to SBT 408 Toxicology. Today we're taking the emergence of modern toxicology to see some historical background of how the field of toxicology developed. So we'll appreciate it much more. How this field of discipline has evolved over the centuries. So that I think maybe after this year you may develop much more interest in toxicology, so that maybe even after doing environmental science, environmental chemistry, you may want to specialize particularly into, say, environmental toxicology, and also perhaps those of you doing industrial biochemistry, you may also develop interest into particularly go into the field of industrial toxicology. So uh, this is a broad field which consists of so many subsections that many of you can decide to particularly specialize in any one of them. So we'll dive into it, and first of all, take a look at the fact that there has actually been an early awareness of, say, poisons or, say, substances around us in the environment being poisonous, even though it is not clear when actually um, such awareness, such understanding started. But some ancient texts, like those texts of the Hebrews, have shown that there has been some awareness of poisonous substances in different societies. And particularly when you look at, Hebrews texts, which for us, if you look at, say, in the Bible, in say 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 39 to 40, you will see something there concerning poisons. And actually, that 2 Kings chapter 4 is a passage about some miracles of Elisha, who was one of the prophets. I mean, those who are Christians in the class, they may easily relate to these things. But it's a story in the Bible that you can go to relate to, that Elisha performed some miracles. And one of those miracles was related to the fact that one of his disciples actually went to the fields and collected some um, herbs and came to use it to prepare some stew. Of course, even they didn't know what it was. They were just looking for food to eat. But uh, once the stew was served to them and they started to eat, then they started to feel uh, some effects, some toxic effects from, so they started having some stomach upsets from what they were eating. And so they exclaim. So you see that the disciples are saying here, so there's a quote here, says, "Oh, man of God, there is death in the pot." And so that was a report of what they were feeling to Elisha, who was the prophet that his disciples were around him and eating together. And the story continues actually in the Bible to talk of the fact that Elisha, sort of purified the pot, and so they no longer suffered from the effect that they were having. So that is one of those very early accounts of humans coming into contact with poisonous substances. Now, during the time, you still have some societies, or in those ancient times, who also were making use of poisonous substances from animal sources, plant sources. Particularly, they use some poisons from some frogs. Some use some poisons even from some snakes, some reptiles, and some plants that they noticed were having some toxic effects. But they actually didn't relate to it as, how we understand it now, as these are poisons. Just by trial and error, because they began to notice that there are certain things that when you consume it, it has a certain effect. And so they decided to make use of some of these substances on arrowheads, which they were using as weapons. So this was in the early stages of the introduction of weapons. So that in hunting, they realize when they make use of these poisonous substances on the arrowheads, they were more successful at their hunting with the weapons that they were using, which were the arrows. And so this is not confined to a particular society. The use of this cuts across different societies across the world, like in Asia, in ancient Europe, in Africa. These things were there's evidence to show that the arrow and the use of these poisonous substances, has been across all these regions. So it's something which has been with the indigenous people of societies across the world. Indeed, you see that even in the Hebrew literature again referring to the Bible, when you go to Job chapter 6, verse 4, you see, Job, going through all his afflictions, made a statement that the arrows of the Almighty are in me. So that is referring to that weapon, the arrow, and saying, my spirit drinks in their poison, which means the practice was known also to such ancient Hebrews and has been brought into their literature, which later came into biblical texts. Indeed, when you take a look at the origin of the term toxicology, which is actually coming from the Greek phrase toxikon pharmakon, which means drug of the bull. So the drug of the bull is referring to the toxins which were being used on the arrowheads at the time. So that was how the Greek. If you trace the origin of the word toxicology coming from the Greek word, which later was referred to as toxicum in Latin. And English language has a lot of this, Latin background. English language actually much of it came out of Latin. It's called the words. You see that the origins of them are basically from Latin, which is toxin. So from toxicum, the English language now becomes toxin. And the study of such toxins is what now we are referring to as toxicology. Now, in such ancient times, poisoning was used for different purposes. As we continue, you come to see that at a certain point, there were what we refer to as some political poisoning. Across the world, persons which were seen as political rivals, and even among business rivals. You had at the time, persons like some professional poisoners that these people hired to do such evil work for them. So, in fact, toxicology has this sort of and let's call it there is some element of evil background to it, because the knowledge of these substances as being harmful to humans became something that people used for you know evil deeds. So you had, for instance, Socrates, who was a Greek philosopher, who was accused, politically of, being corrupting the youth because of his views. He would not succumb to tyranny, authoritarianism. He would speak his mind. And so to eliminate him, he was accused of atheism, that he didn't believe in the gods of, the Greeks, and he was corrupting the youth. And the legal system was actually used to sentence him to death, and sentence him to death by poisoning. And at the time, there were some plant poisons which were used. If you were sentenced to death, you'll be given these plants extracts to drink, and eventually that will result into your death. And that is actually how Socrates died, the Greek philosopher. He was actually given a plant poison, hemlock, to drink. Historically, the picture you see here is only depicting the fact that his last night in prison, he spent it with friends. Friends came to him in prison, so he was together with them before the poison was given to him, and he drank it so that he would die out of such poisoning. So such was the use of these poisonous substances even at the time for political or let's say judicial executions at the time. Now, you do have some ancient, kings like King Mithridates VI of Pontus. Pontus is, let's say, in today's world, that is Turkey. So he was one of these teenage kings at the time. He is someone who actually killed his father, the king, to take the throne. At the time, because he was young, he was, a king, but he had a regent. That was the mother. But later, he also overthrew the mother and became the overall king. And he had been known to have his own concoction, what was being referred to as the antidotum Mithridaticum. That is some mixture which he had to sort of protect himself from any kind of poisoning, because it was a common thing at the time that other kingdoms that regard you as an enemy to them, they would find ways and means to eliminate you, and most of it is through poisoning. Put some poisonous substance from plants or from some animal source into some food stuff or into some drink, and that's eventually either instantly, but mostly it's going to be some slow death. After some period of time, the person dies. So he had his own mixture, which he was using to protect himself. And in fact, such mixture, the antidotum Mithridaticum, has been something which has been used for over centuries. It's kind of a secret mixture that he used. There are some others, of course. At the time, there were persons who were sort of specialists, calling them their work was actually to be poisoning. So they were like um, professional poisoners. And some of these people, like you have this king, the Mithridates the sixth of Pontus, very cruel, will use state prisoners, just like some guinea pigs, some mice, to experiment on the dosage of antidote that will be given to such persons that when they are given poison, they will not die. So of course, you have to be giving some poison to the prisoner unknowingly. It's not that the prisoner knows. So because it's a state prisoner in prison, if the prisoner is going to be given maybe some food, then the substance will be put in it. So then they can test to see how much of the antidote will cure such a prisoner. So by the time you arrive at the dosage of the antidote that will protect the prisoner, of course, some of them are going to die. Similarly, you had one of these Roman kings, the Emperor Nero, was also made use of slaves, also to identify some toxic mushrooms. Of course, later slaves became expensive, so you couldn't just be giving them, toxins, poisons to be dying, and you have to be buying more of such. And so, other rulers also who were in such a practice were making use of, some animals like dogs. So you see, those were like early times of animal research, let's say like what we call now laboratory animals, using for animal trials. So that's actually, you can say that was, say, first animal trials or first human trials that these people were doing, even though it's in a cruel way, because it wasn't something that was following any ethical rules. Of course, at the time there were no ethical rules that you could even talk about. So these were just people with power and making use of, their power to do whatever they like. Now, in our local parlance, say if you come to Ghana, also historically, you at least you have heard stories, particularly when you go to not only in the villages, even in the cities, you do hear stories of persons getting poisoned through alcohol, because a lot of times people see it when they are merrymaking, and some people have disputes over properties, over lands, uh, business disputes, political disputes. And so locally, there is also such kind of, sinister elements, such evil elements as to, the discipline of toxicology. So that there were persons who deliberately gave poisons to others through drinks, through food. And I think it is not even something which is just ancient, even in recent times. There has been at least a few news items that you come across that some of these things do happen. Sometimes some of the things are speculations with family disputes here and there. But of course, the toxins have also been known to be used in hunting among our folks. Then they also had, some local knowledge about the use of substances like, say, charcoal as antidote, so that when they felt any sort of stomach upset, go to the villages, they did make use of charcoal. They just had, that idea that the charcoal can go and absorb the substance which is disturbing them, and so they can bring it out. Of course, clinically, you do have what we refer to as the activated charcoal, which is used in such sense. Then also because of the knowledge some of these folks had on the fact that the poisons which they used, which were some of them being snake poisons, which they used to prepare some concoctions, some reptile concoctions like from frogs and things like that. Just from observation, uh, they saw that these substances were not soluble in water, but they were soluble in oil. And particularly, they made use of palm oil to prepare these substances. And so they also, apply that knowledge, that idea that when a person is poisoned and you give the person palm oil, the palm oil goes to neutralize the substance that a person has taken in and eventually induce some vomiting, and the person vomits out the substance. So you realize in among our folks in the villages, anytime they suspect any kind of some harmful substance that someone has taken in, they give palm oil to the person. The person drinks the palm oil, and then later, the person vomits out. It's a common treatment that you find among our folks. So these are some folk knowledge, and as we were saying earlier, there was these the political assassinations across the world. It was something that was there, that the knowledge of some poisonous substances were being applied among, particularly in the political class, the business class, that when someone is a rival and they just, sort of undertone, not in open violence for anybody to see what it is that they are doing. They actually do hide these, professional poisoners that I mentioned earlier. And they have some different substances that they just, put it into some food substance, into some drink for whoever. And it's actually a profession for such people. They do these things. And so you do see these things in some of the old texts, centuries back. You see one of these texts, Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy, written by Jacob Burckhardt. You find a portion of, what is described as political poisoning. So I refer to it as, the art of political poisoning. This actually, should explain to you why even now in modern times, a lot of times, even when people die natural deaths among us, there is always some kind of suspicion that someone has done something, because of some of these historical background of things, that have happened in the past. And so there is always some kind of suspicion among us that somebody has done something. There's a foul play somewhere which has resulted into the death of someone. It's not always like that, but it's just because of some of these historical background of things which have happened across the world over the years, even before some of us were born. And so that is, it's carried on and has, perpetuated, and people carry these things on over and over again. Right. Now, if we talk of the field of toxicology, there is one particular person who is commonly known as Paracelsus, referred to as the grandfather of modern toxicology. Well, he has a long name, but it's easier to to call him Paracelsus instead of this long name, Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. I mean, that is a mouthful. So you hear in toxicology literature, it is referred to as Paracelsus or simply as his nickname. And he's actually the one who, in arguing with his colleagues, because he was a physician who actually proposed some really radical treatments, like say making use of some mercury for the treatment of some infections, and mercury had been known to be poisonous, to be toxic, and so his colleague physicians wouldn't understand why he would be proposing such a thing. And in such heat of the moment of the back and forth, he made a statement that what is it that is not poison? All things are poison, and none without poison. Only the dose determines that a thing is not poison. And that statement, the in the Latin form, dosi sola facie venenum. It's a statement that you come across in toxicology at all times, that the dose alone makes the poison. And the point he was making was that a substance can be poison at a particular dosage, but that same substance can be therapeutic at a lower dosage. So you can say that it was, so he was, the proposer of the idea of the importance of dosage in the use of substances in, say, pharmacology, because you realize that in the evolution of toxicology had been sort of tied to pharmacology before, later it began to emerge solely as a discipline of its own. And you come to understand why toxicology had been tied to pharmacology, because of the evolution of it, how it developed, how it emerged. It was related to pharmaceutical substances, so that's how come it was much related to it. Right. So we can say Paracelsus, had been the first proposer of the idea of the dose being important in the use of substances. Then, apart from Paracelsus, referring to the dose of substances, which would make a substance either poisonous or not poisonous, he also is noted for another thing, that he was the first who actually related disease conditions to working environments, so that he observed those who worked in the mines, in those who were working in, say, the gold mines, salt mines, did all of these mineral mines. These persons were noted to have some lung disease, and some ulcers, the stomach ulcers. So he noticed these things, and he was relating their working environment, to these things. The work they were doing was a source, or the cause of the source of the cause of these diseases that they were experiencing. And so that's also, we'll say, was the beginning of what you can refer to as environmental and industrial toxicology, because then he was referring to the work they were doing, so which you can say is industrial. And at the same time, these substances were in the environment that they were exposed to. And so that is also to do with the environment in which they were. So Paracelsus also had been known for these major two things. The first, which we mentioned already, the dose, and then now also relating toxicological effects to the working environments of persons suffering from some specific diseases. But at the time, the effect of toxic substances were wrongly attributed to say these substances actually pass through the nervous system to have the effect that they were having. I mean, this thought was among scientists of the time because of the very rapid effects that they observed for these substances. So when a person is exposed to a particular substance, they realize that the toxic effect was very fast. You could see it happening to the person so quickly that they thought that it was due to the substance passing through the nervous system to other organs. That's how they were relating to it. So that was what is referred to as the nerve sympathy theory, that these substances were passing through the nervous system. Until the Italian scientists and experimentalists, he put this into experimentation. You can say that it's one of those people who actually now will bring experimentation to these things. Because before then, they had just been hypotheses. So, for instance, what Paracelsus was saying was just a hypothesis. It wasn't something which was put to experimentation. But this time around, Felix Fontana is an Italian experimentalist, a devout Catholic. You can see he's in his clerical tie. If you read a history, he was always in his clerical tie, working in the lab. And you can say his first works, have brought about the foundations of understanding what we now refer to as absorption and distribution of chemical substances in the body. Like if you take in, when we come to toxicokinetics, you will see these processes of absorption and distribution. Substance that is taken in, into the body, first gets absorbed into the bloodstream and then begins to get distributed to all parts of the body, to other tissues. So his work dispelled this notion that the toxic substances were distributed to other organs in the body through the nervous system, but it's rather in the circulatory system, because he actually did apply some snake venom and some plant venom to some animals via their veins, and saw that, there was no distribution of these substances to any organ through the veins, and later could realize that actually these substances were actually flowing in the bloodstream. It was in the bloodstream that they were actually transported to the organs. And so that conclusion was able to be made that, in fact, the substances gets absorbed into the circulatory system, and it was the circulatory system, the blood, that flows with it to all the other organs and tissues, and then the effect is felt, which is why you see such a fast effect of these substances upon exposure to them. Now, then, as we go forward, we also come across another giant of the field, Bonaventure Ofila, the Spanish, who developed some assay procedures for detection of arsenic in autopsy samples, like say, dead bodies and even bodies that has been exhumed. I mean that there had been some suspicion that these persons died out of poisoning, because at the time there had not been any substance like that had been seen to be the cause of poisoning more than arsenic. So like arsenic was the number one substance of poisoning in the history of toxicology, because this is a substance that was virtually in all kinds of substances. Like if you come to Europe and they had these paper, wallpapers that had arsenic content in them, like say the design. Fabrics had some arsenic component in them. Curtains, arsenic components, even toys of children. So arsenic was sort of spread almost across, every product, household products, industrial products, like working place products, in plastics, everywhere, arsenic. And it was because the knowledge was not there to know that arsenic was a toxic substance that will have uh, such toxic effects on you. And so this substance was high in everyday where everyday materials that were being used around them. And he was able to develop some procedures, some analytical procedures for the detection of these substance arsenic in autopsy samples. But even before then, there was the British James Marsh. James Marsh developed what we refer to as the Marsh test, which is to send some hydrogen sulfide bubbling through biological fluid samples, urine, blood, and you have the sulfide, forming some precipitate with arsenic, yellow precipitate. But this was not in autopsy samples, but this is to, test, urine, blood of living persons to check if they had been exposed to arsenic. So James Marsh also developed that. So all of these we refer to as, say, this was sort of the beginning of forensic toxicology, detection of these substances in either autopsy or exhumed bodies or in biological fluids. Of course, Ofila also, wrote the first modern toxicology text, what we refer to as the Treatise of Toxicology, and in that he actually brought toxicology forth as a multidisciplinary area of study, which involves, fields like anatomy, physiology, chemistry, biochemistry. All of these things, come together. So it's not like it was such a narrow field that only just a few people can do, but you actually will need professionals, expertise from different fields. If you, for instance, you go into some toxicological studies, you'll need persons of different backgrounds to be able to come together to do very meaningful work, have some good results coming out of there. Right. Now, toxicology continued to mature, and you have one of the students of Bonaventure in France, Robert Christison, who himself is a Scottish. So after studying, he actually went back to Scotland. He was in Britain, and he wrote, the book Treatise on Poisons in relation to medical jurisprudence, because when he returned to Britain, he worked in such area of medical jurisprudence. So you had that book written, Treatise on Poisons in relation to medical jurisprudence, physiology, and the practice of physique. And in this book, he reviewed various. He brought forth the review of various diagnostic and treatment methods, like methods which have been used to diagnose intoxication, and also methods which have been used to treat some of these intoxication. He brought all of these together in one text, which was a very valuable material for the early scientists in the field at the time. And in fact, one of the major things he did was that he promoted toxicology so much in Britain that it resulted to passing what we refer to as the Arsenic Act in 1851. Because we just mentioned that there had not been a substance involved in, say, intoxication in toxicology much more than the element arsenic, because this substance arsenic had been in various substances, in paints, just mention it, in furniture, curtains, house utensils. It was all over, because the knowledge wasn't there. But once the knowledge had come out, he was someone who was always promoting the field of toxicology and talking about the harmful effect of the substance arsenic, and it resulted in the passing of the Arsenic Act, that law in Britain in 1851. So from here, you can begin to understand the kind of pain that societies went through, learning through the hard way, facing difficulties, and out of those difficulties, trying to shape society and bringing up policies and laws to, regulate things, so that more and more people do not continue to suffer from some of these things which were happening at the time. And you will see more of this, phenomenon, that laws, where people will be getting passed, because of certain occurrences, certain events. You get some laws being passed. As we go along, you see these things over and over again. Then you have another British physician, doctor, who also hypothesized that the cause of what's referred to as there were some tumors that was growing on the scrotum of young men who, when they were in their teenage ages, were working as what we refer to as chimney sweeps. So say in Europe, because of the temperate weather that comes in winter, they use heaters. And these heaters they were using at the time, they were using, say, wood, light it to warm their rooms. And they had these chimneys on top of the houses so that the chimney would take out the smoke up into the sky. And you had this not only in domestic settings, but even in industrial settings, they had these chimneys that should take out the gases, the exhaust gases that were produced when they used fuel to they burn fuel to warm um, the indoor space in which they were. And these chimneys, over time, get clogged with soot, some black smoke, and it becomes thick. And so they had to be removing the soot all the time. And so they had these young boys who, because before somebody can do that work, the person too shouldn't be someone who is plumpy. The person should be someone that can fit into the chimney to be able to remove the soot out of it. And these people in Britain at the time, there wasn't anything like some protective clothing for them and all of that. They just got into it, like sometimes even almost naked. Because the clothes too was something which could be disturbing in your movement. And so they were so much exposed to this black soot. That was some kind of a very hazardous occupation to take on. And later in life, these people were observed to have some tumors growing on their scrotum, which is what we're referring to as scrotum cancer. And at the time, that scrotum cancer was mistakenly seen as, say, a sexually transmitted disease, a sexually transmitted infection. That was how the society was relating to it. The patient himself, even the doctors of the time, were referring to such condition as a sexually transmitted infection until Percival Port hypothesized that actually those persons were having such condition due to the work they did when they were younger. They were being exposed to this soot, the black soot, which was the cause. But that was still just a hypothesis. It wasn't proven experimentally. Later, about some years later, you had the Japanese pathologist who now proved that hypothesis. Because see, another thing that I should even talk about is that what people were disputing about, what Percival Port was saying was that when you go to other parts of Europe, like say in Germany, you rarely come across such condition in such persons who worked in cleaning the chimneys. But the condition was rampant among the British boys. And so the British at the time were disputing that it wasn't because of the work, but it is that maybe the boys were not bathing well. And so sort of just wanting to brush off the issue to say that in Germany, the people bath well, that is why they were not having such an issue. But if those boys should bath well, it's sort of, having prejudicial, notion about those boys, to say that they don't bath, because of course every time they will see them, they are looking black because of the work they are doing. So they say they don't bath. That is why they are having such a condition. But then it was proven that no, actually in Germany, those same people, the chimney sweeps that you find in Germany, they had protective clothing. They had some protective clothing in Germany that they wore to do the work. And so they were not exposed to the soot. Now, bringing this experimentally, what Yamagiwa, the Japanese scientist, what he did was he applied, coal tar to the ears of rabbits, and realized that, over time, this coal tar, which was being applied on the ears of the rabbits, resulted into some tumors on the ears of the rabbits. And so that was how experimentally it was proven that actually this soot, this black smoke thick, which was deposited in the chimneys that the boys were getting into contact with, was actually the cause of the tumors that were growing on their scrotum. And this was one of the first demonstrations of what we currently refer to as chemical carcinogenesis. I mean, the chemical cause of cancer. Later, this soot was found to contain what we refer to as some polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which was something that organic chemists later studied, that the components of the soot, and realized that they were actually enriched with these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And later these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons actually will, as we go ahead in the course, we'll come to see the effect of some of these compounds, because polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons had later been identified as a carcinogenic substance. So we'll speak more about it when we actually talking of, say, toxicants, the kind of effects they will have and all of that. We'll see it. Right. Then there was also some, what we refer to as some bladder tumors that were also seen in a textile working factory workers in Germany. And the medical doctor, the pathologist, Ludwig Renn, I think went for one conference at the time in Berlin. It was in 1895 that he was talking to his colleagues at a conference. In his submissions, he was speaking of the fact that there are some dyes which were used in the textile industry, which were responsible for the cause of bladder tumors, which were being observed in persons who worked in those factories for some time. But as everything he was saying, his colleagues were not listening to him. And so you see the quote here, he said, "It all came to nothing. I had pointed quite clearly to the great importance of aniline factor." So those substances, referring to as the aniline dyes, today we know these are some aromatic amines. And those are substances, also some groups of class of substances, aromatic amines, that will also see their effect. It says, in view of the etiology of the cancer, it was in vain. Nobody was listening to him. Everything he was saying, they were not accepting it. That, how could those aniline dyes, which were being used in textile industry for years, how could they be causing bladder tumors? Of course, later it had been proven that these aniline dyes themselves they were not directly causing the cancer, but as we'll come to see when we go ahead in the course, we'll come to see, say, process of biotransformation, where you have these substances being converted into their metabolites in the liver. And so the metabolites that get excreted out of the body, they get excreted through urine. And so once they get into the kidneys, they later will get stored with urine in the bladder, and it is those metabolites that were causing the bladder tumors, the bladder cancer, which was developing. So these had later been proven. So posterity actually, proved that Ludwig Rehm was right when he was talking about these aniline dyes in the textile industry, which were causing bladder tumors. Now we can talk much more. Coming closer in the 20th century, there had been more of these stories of occupational, cancer epidemics across the world. You had what you refer to as the mesothelioma, a kind of lung cancer, which was observed in miners of asbestos. So some asbestos miners and millers in Australia were found to, common with this kind of lung cancer. Before then, they were working with asbestos. Asbestos was a substance which, at a point, was seen to be one of these, useful substances. Only later, it had been noticed that no, these asbestos were carcinogenic. I don't know if some of you may remember, asbestos were used before in Ghana for roofing sheets. We had some roofing sheets which were made of asbestos. But later, those were prohibited after there had been enough evidence of them causing lung cancer. So we no longer have those asbestos roofing sheets in Ghana. Another type of cancer, occupational, related to occupation, had been angiosarcoma. It's also a kind of a liver cancer, which was caused by the precursor of polyvinyl chloride. Say the production of these PVC plastics. You had this precursor, the vinyl chloride, which the exposure to it was found to be causing the liver cancer, angiosarcoma, in some plant workers in US. But of course, later there had been the development of some working protocols, designing the workplace in such a way that workers in these places would not be exposed to this substance, the vinyl chloride, in such a way that it would be causing this liver cancer. So once the cause was known, there were steps taken. So now workers working with this vinyl chloride do not get exposed and be suffering from this liver cancer. So that problem had been dealt with. There had also been different stories, across the countries in the 20th century. For instance, there had been the story of, say, lead exposure causing brain injury in different parts of the world. Of course, we talk about arsenic. You have some pesticides that contain arsenic, and these also were causing some skin diseases. And every time when I talk about pesticides, I have some passion for it because of how in Ghana there's some indiscriminate use of pesticides and herbicides that you have untrained people, some farmers in the villages just go to some shop somewhere and buy some chemical and just come and mix it. Sometimes they cannot even read what is on it, even though the person who they go to buy this thing from in a shop somewhere may have some idea about these things and speak to them about it, that they should use this amount, they should have this amount and add this amount of water to it. If you actually come in contact with some of these people, you realize that sometimes they think that they want the thing to be so effective that sometimes the instruction that is given to them, even in the shop, they don't listen to it. They decide to use twice the amount, 3 times the amount, because they feel maybe they want whichever weed that they are controlling in their farms. They want to be sure that the weed is going to die and for a long time will not grow in their farms. And so they double these doses and all of that. And these things actually, it's not only they that are getting exposed to them, but others in the environment, because when you spray those pesticides, sometimes they also get into the atmosphere and they spread. They go to other people's farms, other farmers that are around in the environment. They can get to anybody. And not only in the farms, even in the cities, you see people just get up and start making use of some of these substances around their houses where there are people around. And so all the other people who are around get exposed to some of these things. Well, if you look at the pesticides which we have in Ghana, like mosquito sprays and things like that, the way they are designed is such that when you are making use of them, you actually get exposed to them, like those sprays. If you're making use of these sprays, you are standing there and making use of it. But you see that in some other countries, we have these insecticides in such a way that they are designed just like, you see how okay, let me use this as an example, like tear gas. It is is opened and then thrown, so it goes away from you. So we have these pesticides that, let's say, people want to use in maybe either at a workplace or maybe domestically. Some of the pesticides which they use domestically, when they want to make use of them, after they are ready, everything is covered and all of that, close all windows, and they want to make use of it, they stand at the door, the exit of the indoor environment. They open it and just roll it on the floor, close the door behind themselves, and leave for hours. So they are not exposed to these things. By the time they come back, because you are asked to not be around the place for some number of hours. So by the time they come, the pesticide had worked and they are not been exposed to it. That's not the case in Ghana. You will be holding this thing and be spraying it and you are exposed to it. Some people don't even wear masks when they are making use of these things. And some of these things have some very serious implications, if not immediately. Later in life, when they get accumulated, they have some serious issues for the nervous system. All right. Now, you see, now we talk much of these occupational hazards of exposure to these toxic substances. This led to, the realization of how, a workplace can be potentially hazardous wherever you are working. Uh, in a laboratory, in a university, uh, like me, I'm a lecturer. Yes, my workplace can be hazardous. After all, I work in a chemistry lab and other laboratories. And apart from that, well, you just get exposed to things. Even if you are on campus, Accra Technical University, you are exposed. The place is even just in the city, at the center of the city, where there are so many industrial activities going on around you. Now, with this realization of workplace, that let's take to say the workplace itself, what's the effect of a particular workplace can have on its workers. With this realization of workplace being potentially hazardous, there had been, uh, laws that have been passed in different countries. So, for instance, the first of these laws was in Germany, which was referred to as the Working Men's Insurance Law, which uh, made sure that persons had some insurance. There were insurance funds that were opened to cater for persons that get exposed to some injurious substances, that maybe in the line of your work you get exposed to some of these hazards. There should be an insurance to take care of you and your family. So that was the first kind of um, law for the protection of uh, persons, working persons, so that they are not just left after they get affected by their work, and they are no longer even able to work again, for instance, and then they are just left to just suffer. No, there should be some insurance for these persons. So yes, it is the realization that workplace can be potentially hazardous that brought about the passing of such a law in Germany. And then from then on, other countries followed through. So you see the Workmen's Compensation Law was also passed in UK in 1897. In the USA in 1911, you had, the formation of the National Safety Council. And just 3 years later, you had the formation of the Division of Industrial Hygiene, also in the US. So you had these laws and uh, different agencies being formed to take care of these industrial hazards that workers of different industries are exposed to. Now, all this while, all the people we mentioned, uh, were all men. I mean, to be fair, uh, let's talk about also one stalwart, Alice Hamilton, who was the first woman appointed to the faculty of Harvard Medical School. And he did a lot of human research concerning the health effects of occupational chemicals, and wrote a lot of, it published, several textbooks upon which you can say you had a solid foundation of industrial toxicology and occupational medicine as of today in modern times. You can speak about industrial toxicology and occupational medicine without mentioning Alice Hamilton. She did a great job in that field. All right, now we'll take a look at some of the uh, a few modern toxicological disasters that actually result into some revolution of the field of toxicology. And the first one is the disaster that is related to diethylene glycol. That's a compound And this happened, say, in the US in the 1930s. And so you come to also understand why um, you see that countries are around the world, uh, you know, develop their, for instance, pharmacopoeia or their food and drug laws, like Ghana, are developed based on what had been developed, say, by the United States. That's, uh, you know, uh, was a pioneer in this before the Europe, European countries like the British, German, European Union, before even, the Asians all were following suit. So people went through some pain before. So for instance, that ethylene glycol, yes, was a solvent which had been used industrially. I mean, to dissolve, um, hydrophobic substances in industry. But it wasn't something which was being used in substances that humans were consuming. I see there was a drug that was developed. I think this drug, sulfanilamide, it's an antibiotic that was developed. I think it was in Germany, and this drug was not soluble in water, and also at the same time, because of how bitter the drug was, people were not uh, liking to use it. And you had this pharmaceutical company in the US, the Massengill Company in Bristol, that decided to uh, develop a suspension of this antibiotic, sulfanilamide. Now, because the drug couldn't dissolve in water, what are you going to use to develop that suspension? And you had a chemist there at the time. Of course, they didn't know the toxic effects of diethylene glycol. It's like you just know that diethylene glycol is a compound, is a solvent that you can use to dissolve substances that are hydrophobic. Maybe it's possible. Maybe if you dissolve sulfanilamide in it dissolves, then we can have the suspension. Because if water will not dissolve it, let's look for another solvent. Then they use this solvent and then dissolve it. And later, they realized that, in fact, the suspension which they developed and sold to persons caused serious, kidney disease. In fact, that was a disaster. Just over, say, 4 weeks, you had 105 victims. And so over a period of time that they brought this drug out to persons and they took them, several of them got injured, those who didn't die, but the vast majority of them later they died. And he later realized that, in fact, you had in children just 53 mils of that drug was fatal to children, and 99 mils was fatal to adults. That was a disaster that resulted into the chemist at the time who developed that suspension in that company. He committed suicide when he got to know of it. Now, quickly, that resulted into the US president at the time, Franklin Roosevelt, signing the US Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act into law. That was in 1938. So you see, because of that pain, that thing which happened to them, they quickly enacted the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act law. So because it was sort of a chaotic situation in the 1930s, it was kind of a chaotic situation in the US. Lots of poisoning cases coming from these substances. Because as you can see from the historical account we just went through, you could see that there were a lot of these situations coming up, a substance comes out, used, and then it causes a problem. Even after passing this law, you still see that there had been problems again. So you see, after passing this law and looking from other countries, looking to see what was happening at the time, other countries started taking steps to to follow this step. In fact, some people at the time, uh, for a long time, there were countries that just adopted this Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act law, and later uh, had been trying to develop their own laws. I don't know in which year was the Food and Drug law passed in Ghana. Um, I remember the law which was passed which made a Food and Drug Authority fall under the Ministry of Health or so, came in 2012. But before then, of course, there was some regulation. But most of it, you see that it's actually having a foundation of the U.S. drug cosmetic law, the European regulations. They put these things together. So those were foundations upon which they developed those regulations for us. People went through pain, and then they developed it. And because we also saw their pain, we learned from it, and so we follow suit and develop these things. Now, another thing was that still in the 1930s, you had you had this alcoholic beverage in the US, which was some ginger drink. I think you call it ginger Jake or so. So it was sort of you see what's in Ghana now. We have some of these Casapreco and the rest, and they just put some plants into some ethanol, and they start calling it bitters and things like that. So there was something like that in the US, the ginger Jake. So this was a ginger drink that alcohol with ginger in it, that many people were getting sort of addicted to drinking so much of it, because at the time there had been some financial breakdown in the country. People lost money and all of that, and they were taken to drinking so much of alcohol. And so you had say the state insurance coming up with the idea, the policy telling the manufacturers of this drink that they should make the ginger drink so bitter that it will not taste well for persons to be drinking it so much. And interestingly, with this proposal that they made, caused some people to begin to produce some adulterated forms of the drink. The proposal was just that increase the ginger quantity so that it will not be so palatable for persons. So that was it, ginger. But because of that, they saw an opportunity. Some people saw an opportunity to begin to do, different kinds of adulterations to take into the market. Of course, this is how you can say greed for money can drive us human beings to do whole lots of things. In fact, it's like it's almost an inevitable effect that we experience as humans, that the moment we shift our mind to making money, focusing on making money, everything else becomes not important to us. Everything we think about, money is everything and nothing else matters. And this is some kind of a dullness of the mind, which is almost inevitable, that accompanies this, sort of quest of making money. And so you had some two businessmen who, for whatever came into their mind, decided to use this substance, tricrysyl phosphate, commonly referred to as TOCP. This is a solvent which is used in industry to dissolve things like lacquer. The lacquer which is used by the carpenters, or varnish. And for whatever came into their mind, they decided to add this to their brand of the ginger jake. Other people were doing other things to make their ginger jake more palatable. So they saw an opportunity so that when others were adding more ginger so that people wouldn't like to take them, they would rather do this to be so nice that people will begin to buy this. That's what people started to do. And these guys, some two business guys, decided to add this, the tricrysyl phosphate, to their drink. And what was the effect? It was such a disaster that persons who took the drink quickly, they experienced some sort of paralytic effect, some loss of control of their muscles, the leg muscles, the toe, the foot, like as they walk, they just couldn't control, and they walk clumsily. And a lot of these people have been rendered into wheelchairs. I mean, later when I share the slides with you, you can read some of these. You can read this thing. I just don't want to be reading all of this to you. You can read it yourself. And then, because these were things at the time, people write short and either some poetic, messages in some newspapers. So this was one of these. William Shepard, who wrote in the Collier's Weekly in 1930, talking about what was happening at the time, the adulteration of this ginger jake with cresol phosphate, and the effect that it was having on the victims, was being referred to as the jake paralysis. All right, now this is another very serious thing, very, very, very serious event that occurred in the history, or in the history of the world, as far as toxicology is concerned, is to do with this drug thalidomide in the 1950s to 60s. You may have heard of it because there had been a lot of documentaries on this. And if you go online and check thalidomide, you go maybe even you can go to YouTube and all of that. There should be a lot of documentaries, maybe even by WHO, maybe BBC, different channels. You'll find what happened with thalidomide. So you can see in 1950s to 1960s, 1950, that's after the Second World War, Second World War from 1945, 1949. And so people were so depressed. Some people were suffering from insomnia. They couldn't sleep well and all of that, particularly old people, pregnant people. And there was a lot of dependence on these tranquilizers, primarily these barbiturates, which should be acting on the nervous system, to calm their nerves, across Europe, in America. People were so much dependent on these drugs. Then came a German company that produced this drug, thalidomide, which they claimed at the time that was having no toxic effects even to pregnant women, even though they hadn't done thorough research to prove that. They rigorously marketed the drug so much that this drug was sold in Germany, in other parts of Europe, Britain, France, of course, I think, yes. Across Europe, yes, the drug was being sold. But of course, in America, this drug didn't have such an effect because at the time, the American the American society was lucky to have a very strong woman there at the time, one Dr. Kesley, that actually, because of his strong science research background, when the company that was into the marketing of this drug, into the production of this drug in the United States, wanted to register the drug with the FDA, he put that to a very rigorous process. She didn't just accept it, because she was also observing what was happening in other parts of the world, even though there had not been clear proof of what had happened in other countries, because the company in Germany that produced this drug, even at the time, was denying the effect of the drug, because it was being taken by not only old people, but also pregnant women for what we refer to as morning sickness, when pregnant women wake up in the morning and they begin to feel nausea, to vomit. So they take this drug, and some old people took it so that they could sleep well. But the effect was actually on the newborn babies, which meant that this drug was not safe for pregnant women, but it was marketed as such. Because they did some tests. There were some tests which were done with some, pregnant rats. But you see, the effect on those pregnant rats did not reveal any of such defects. So you can see there's a difference between what happens in some of these laboratory or clinical trial animals than in humans. And as we go, you see there's a particular field of toxicology that deals with that. And so those women who took this thalidomide later, the babies, the pregnant women that took the drug, the babies that they had were having this condition, what we refer to as phocomelia, which is a reduction in the limbs of the babies that they had given birth to. So instead of the baby developing, the hands and the legs, they only had some flaps. Their nervous system was seriously affected. And you could see their genitals were also not developed. So that was, very serious condition. It was such a disaster, across the continent of Europe. So again, this, of course, will also result in very strict laws. And this actually now resulted into, the emergence of toxicology as a discipline. Because now, after that, you had in April 1962, the Society of Toxicology was founded in the USA with a main objective that they should promote development of toxicology curricula and research in universities, so that this particular field of toxicology will be well studied. Particularly pertaining to chemical toxicology. So you see why from the beginning I was mentioning that the historical account, the historical background would tell you why in the beginning, toxicology was very much linked to pharmacology. Because these things which we have seen, much of it happened in relation to some medication, like, thalidomide. That was a disaster at the time that, resulted into the formation of a such society that was promoting, the development of curricula in universities. 10 years later, about 10 years later, you had in Britain also the formation of, say, the British Toxicology Society, which, also with, similar objectives. And you had, from then on, in the 1960s to 70s, you had an establishment of, different research journals that were dedicated to the field of toxicology. And so what it means is that there will be a lot of research works that will be coming in that field of toxicology. It also meant that now countries are going to, dedicate much more of their budgets towards toxicological studies, so that these toxicological research works were now going to receive much more funding, much more attention from these countries. Out of pain, you learn to be wise. So this is sometimes I do say that, in Ghana sometimes there are certain things that we take for granted. We seem not to care, and I say that, look, something serious is going to happen to us, and when it happens, then we'll start getting serious. Because for now, so for instance, if you look at the last time we had a lecture, I talked about, say, what we are doing with agroglossy, just polluting the whole place, and what we are doing with our water bodies. Is when the effect really strikes, then we'll start to respect one another. For now, we still talk anyhow to one another. In Ghana, just watch the the mediascape, the people we look up to as role models, leaders, and see how they communicate, how they talk to one another with so much disrespect. It's almost like just shouting at one another and not actually having any kind of a discussion, like a conversation that should occur between human beings. But it's always one person is shouting at the top of his house, at the top of his voice, saying something that everybody must take and nobody else should say anything. What he's saying is the best, and that's it. And if you watch, it's kind of we have this sort of a thing that you can notice it, that we seem not to have respect for one another. We seem to just be shouting at one another. Nobody listens to what the other person is saying. And I say something serious is going to happen. Because you see, when you look at these histories, you see that serious things happened to people and they took certain decisions. And when they take the decisions and they make the laws, they are strict with it. It's not what we do in Ghana that maybe you have a Food and Drugs Authority law, then you have people filled the whole of these radio stations and TV stations, and they're saying whatever it is they want. They just bring some kind of a concoction or anything and come and sit on radio, TV, and talk for 30 minutes, 1 hour, promoting some kind of a thing that, cures so many diseases, and everybody is looking on, and it's not that some of this chaos didn't happen in some countries before. It happened. And they once they went through the pain, they became serious. And when they become serious, when they make the laws, they enforce it. It's not like you make laws and you be dancing around it. Depending on who it is, you apply it how you want it. No. So it's just a matter of time. Maybe in some 100 years, maybe not in our lifetime, maybe we may die and go before, maybe some of our grandchildren, great-grandchildren will get serious uh, and have a better society. But this is the beginning that some of us can talk about it. And later, based on what we go through over the years, there will become a better society in that part of the world. All right. Now, this takes us into what's the modern toxicology broken down into different subdivisions. You have this what we refer to as descriptive toxicology, analytical toxicology, regulatory toxicology. Mechanistic toxicology is actually what deals with what I was talking about, that you have substances that the fact that it's not having a certain effect, or it's having a certain effect in a laboratory animal, doesn't mean the effect is going to be the same in humans. And so, these differences are studied. Clinical toxicology, into diagnostics, treatments, forensic, more of criminology, maybe the use of substances, illicit substances and things like that, or maybe to sort of investigate what we did talk about as poisoning. Of maybe someone who either is affected, suffered some intoxication, or actually has suffered some fatality, death. You use forensic toxicology to deal with that. Of course, analytical toxicology just talks of the fact that you're going to use this modern analytical instrumentation, to analyze samples, use these analytical chemistry techniques, to study the effect of these substances. Descriptive will be much more of describing the effect of these things. So, that field is actually very, very big, broad, and the number of people who work on, say, for instance, new substances which don't have enough information, that persons will have to actually work hard and see the effect of it across different spectra, describe the effect of these things on different organisms, different systems. It's a whole lot of work over there. Occupational, of course, particularly for the industry, for the labor force, for the workplace, you have that, what is referred to as occupational. And then environmental, you want to see the effect of these substances, not only on the living organisms, but even on the non-living elements of the ecosystem. So all of these come together to give you, this. Of course, this is not exhaustive. There can be so many other divisions that will come out of this if you go into any of these scientific publishing platforms now that are dedicated to toxicology. You will see that there are different fields of toxicology actually, that maybe each of those will fall under any of these. Right. And now the scope. So if you take the scope of modern toxicology, starting from the very lowest point of chemical toxicology, that will be looking at the molecular level of the substances, looking at the kind of reactions that they undergo, and then the kind of interactions that these molecules, will be having with, say, the cell. So now you've taken it to, say, the cellular level of the organism. And you bring it up to the system level. But so now, I mean, from the cellular level, these cells come together to form tissues. So even so, like I was mentioning the last time, you even have, toxicology that will be maybe focused on the tissues on which these substances are acting. And then you go on to now look at the organs, the particular organs like the liver, the lungs, the heart, the brain. It will be looking at these different systems to see the effect that a substance has on any of these systems. And then clinical, that is, to study the effect, say, on a patient. That's a whole organism. What is the effect of a substance on that organism? And then after you come up with a effect, like say you have a diagnosis, then you can then prescribe some treatment for uh, such a person. And then of course, at a population level, when you look at the effects of a toxic substance on not just a single individual, but a society. So that would be like studies into epidemiology, for instance, what really is happening with a group of people. It can be a particular society within a country or a whole country. Or if you take maybe a particular ecosystem, maybe you focus on a particular habitat, the organisms that are interacting among themselves. What is the effect of a particular substance on these populations living in such a particular habitat? All right, so this is where we'll end it because I mean we've come to modern toxicology. Toward the beginning, you were the emergence of modern toxicology. So we have come all the way to the modern toxicology, what it is. And so now I'll keep quiet and listen to you. You can write in the chat, I'll respond, or alternatively, you can raise your hand and I will enable your microphone, call your name, you speak. We still have about some 13 minutes more. So if you have anything, the floor is open.